I sat across from Noah at the rooftop restaurant, watching the city lights blur through my wine glass. Everything looked perfect. The candles, the view, the expensive bottle he'd ordered. Then he said it. "We're done, Layla." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. He kept talking, explaining how he'd found someone better, someone younger. My intern. The girl I'd mentored for 6 months, taught everything I knew. My hands started trembling, but I forced them still. I wouldn't cry here, not in front of him, not where everyone could see. I stood up slowly, grabbed my purse and smiled. That fake smile burned my face, but I held it. Outside, I climbed into a taxi and finally let the tears fall. Silent, hot, endless. The driver didn't say anything, just drove while I fell apart in his backseat. The city kept moving, people kept laughing, life kept going. But mine had stopped completely. I couldn't breathe right. Couldn't think straight. Everything I'd built with Noah, 2 years of my life, meant nothing to him now. I called my assistant the next morning, my voice flat and hollow. "Book me a week off. And find me a driver full-time. I can't deal with anything right now." She didn't ask questions, just made it happen. That's why I paid her well. 2 days later, someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened it to find a man in his early 30s, clean-cut, wearing a simple black shirt and jeans. His eyes were calm, almost too calm, like still water. "I'm your driver for the week. You can call me Jay." I nodded without really looking at him. "Fine. Wait downstairs. I'll text you when I'm ready." He didn't seem offended by my coldness. Just nodded once and left quietly. I watched him go, wondering briefly why someone so young was doing this job. Then I stopped wondering because I didn't care. I didn't care about anything anymore. Noah had taken that from me. The ability to feel curious, hopeful, alive. I grabbed my phone and stared at our old photos, then deleted every single one. Jay drove me to my favorite coffee shop the next morning. I didn't tell him it was my favorite. He must have gotten the address from my assistant. Inside, I ordered the same croissant I always got, then sat staring at it on the plate. I couldn't eat. My stomach felt like concrete. Through the window, I saw Jay waiting by the car, scrolling through his phone. He looked patient, unbothered by the wait. When I finally came out empty-handed, he opened the door without comment. We drove in complete silence. No small talk, no questions, no forced cheerfulness. Just quiet. At a red light, he glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "The silence isn't heavy with you," he said softly, then looked away. I blinked, surprised. What did that even mean? Most men I knew demanded conversation, attention, explanations. They needed me to perform, to be interesting, to fill space. But Jay just drove, and somehow that made everything feel lighter. I studied the back of his head, confused by how safe his silence felt. "Can you take me to the beach?" I asked on the third day. "There's one about an hour north. I need to get out of the city." Jay nodded, changed routes without hesitation. The drive was long and quiet, just the hum of the engine and my thoughts eating me alive. At the beach, I kicked off my heels and walked straight into the sand. Then I broke. Completely, messily, brutally. I sobbed so hard I couldn't breathe, mascara running down my face, my whole body shaking. Jay didn't rush over. Didn't try to fix me or tell me everything would be okay. He just grabbed a blanket from the trunk, walked over slowly and placed it beside me in the sand. Then he sat down a few feet away, giving me space but staying close. He didn't speak. Didn't touch me. Just existed there, steady and calm while I fell apart. When I finally stopped crying, my throat raw, I looked at him. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded once, his eyes kind but careful. On the drive back, we got a flat tire. Of course we did. Jay pulled over at a rundown gas station with flickering neon lights and called for a tow truck. 45 minutes, he said, hanging up. We ended up sitting on the curb, sharing cheap chips and candy bars from the gas station. I actually laughed, just a small, surprised sound, when he made a face at the stale chocolate. "That bad?" I asked. "Worse than bad. Criminal," he replied, but he smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him, and something about it made my chest feel less tight. We sat there under those buzzing lights, and for a moment I forgot about Noah entirely. Then Jay said something that stopped me cold. "You deserve more than what he gave you." I turned to stare at him, my heart suddenly racing. "How do you know about him?" Jay looked at me steadily, no apology in his expression. "You cry his name in your sleep sometimes." In the car. My face burned with embarrassment. The next day I asked Jay to take me somewhere I hadn't been in years. "My old neighborhood," I said quietly. "I want to see it again." He drove without asking why, following my directions through streets that got smaller and more worn. When we stopped in front of the tiny apartment building where I grew up, I just sat there staring. "I lived on the 3rd floor," I told him. "That window there. I used to hide in the library 2 blocks away when my parents fought, which was almost every night. Books saved me." Jay turned in his seat to look at me, really look at me. "And you saved yourself by getting out," he said. There was something in his voice, admiration maybe, or sorrow, or both. I couldn't tell. But the way he looked at me made me feel seen in a way Noah never had. We sat there for 20 more minutes while I told him stories I'd never told anyone. And he listened to every single word like it mattered. The week ended too fast. On the last day, Jay helped carry my bags back into my building. I felt awkward suddenly, unsure how to say goodbye to someone who'd seen me at my absolute worst. "Thank you," I said, fumbling for my wallet. "For everything." He waved away the tip I tried to give him. "Keep it." Then he looked at me with those calm, steady eyes and said, "I hope you remember who you are, not who he made you feel like." The words hit me square in the chest. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching long after he was gone, feeling strangely hollow. Like I'd lost something I didn't know I had. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the week. The beach, the gas station, his quiet presence. Who was Jay? And why did it feel like he'd taken a piece of me with him when he left? Monday morning I returned to work. The office buzzed with nervous energy. Our new CEO was arriving today for the first big meeting. Nobody knew much about him except that he was young, powerful, and had bought the company outright. I walked into the boardroom with my tablet and coffee, trying to focus. Then the door opened. The room went silent. He walked in wearing an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding immediate attention. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, crashing to the floor. "Who's Jay?" "No, Jaden Cross. The new CEO. Owner of everything." He looked directly at me, and for one heart-stopping second, I saw recognition flash across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by cold professionalism. He introduced himself to the room like we'd never met, like he hadn't sat with me on a beach while I cried. My chest felt like it was caving in. The warmth, the kindness, it was all gone. He was a complete stranger now. I couldn't breathe. Jaden spoke in clipped, formal tones throughout the entire meeting. His eyes never lingered on me, never softened. Every word felt calculated, distant, controlled. I pretended to take notes, but my hands were shaking too badly to write anything coherent. When the meeting finally ended, I bolted after him into the hallway. "Was any of that week real?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. He stopped walking but didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his expression was blank, unreadable. "You hired a driver," he said coldly. "That's all it was. Nothing more." The words felt like a slap across my face. "You're lying. Believe what you want." He walked away without looking back, leaving me standing there alone, my heart cracking all over again. I'd been broken by Noah, then carefully put back together by Jay's kindness. Now Jaden had shattered me completely. That night I cried harder than I had at the beach. Because this time I'd actually started to hope again. Late one evening I returned to my office to grab files I'd forgotten. There, sitting in the center of my desk, was a single white rose. No note. No explanation. Just a perfect white rose. My heart hammered as I picked it up carefully, breathing in its soft scent. Was it from him? It had to be. But why? The next morning I searched for Jaden everywhere, needing answers. When I finally spotted him in the corridor, he looked right through me like I was invisible. The emotional whiplash was destroying me. One minute there were roses, the next complete coldness. I couldn't understand what game he was playing. Then Noah appeared at my office door, smirking that familiar arrogant smirk I used to find charming. "Heard you're back at work. Want to grab dinner? For old time's sake." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're joking." "Come on, Layla. We were good together." "Get out," I said quietly, dangerously. He left, but his presence alone had ruined my entire day. The company charity gala arrived too quickly. I almost didn't go, but my assistant insisted I had to make an appearance. I wore a red dress that hugged every curve, my armor for the night. The moment I walked in, I felt eyes on me. Jaden stood across the room, a drink in his hand, surrounded by board members. His eyes found mine immediately and something flickered there, heat, maybe longing, before his expression hardened again. I danced with colleagues, laughed at appropriate moments, played my part perfectly. But I felt Jaden watching me all night, his gaze heavy and constant. When a man from marketing asked me to dance, I accepted. As we swayed to the music, I glanced over and saw Jaden's jaw tighten, his knuckles white around his glass. Later I stepped outside for air. He followed. "Don't let him touch what he broke," Jaden said quietly from behind me. I turned slowly to face him. "You broke me too," I whispered. Then I walked away, leaving him alone in the cold. The next morning I found an envelope tucked inside my office drawer. One I'd opened 100 times before but had been empty yesterday. My hands trembled as I pulled out the letter inside. The handwriting was unmistakably Jaden's, but the signature said J. It was dated 8 days ago, 1 week before he became CEO. The letter read, "If things were different, I'd ask you to stay beside me, not behind me. But my world isn't simple and you deserve simple. You deserve peace. I'm sorry for what's coming." I read it 5 times, tears blurring the words. He'd known. Before the boardroom, before the coldness, he'd already known he would have to push me away. This wasn't cruelty, it was protection. But protection from what? I clutched the letter to my chest, my heart breaking and mending simultaneously. That night I slept with the letter under my pillow, reading it again every time I woke, wondering if it was a promise or a goodbye. During a high-stakes presentation to potential investors, I froze. The numbers I'd memorized vanished from my mind, replaced by panic and white noise. 40 sets of eyes stared at me expectantly. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. Then Jaden's voice cut through the silence. "What Layla is about to explain," he said smoothly, standing up, "is the most innovative strategy this company has implemented in a decade." He walked to the front and stood beside me, his presence steadying. He didn't take over, he handed me back my confidence. I found my voice again and finished strong. After the investors left, pleased and impressed, I cornered Jaden in the hallway. "Why did you do that?" He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with something raw and unguarded. "Because you're the best strategist I've ever worked with. And I won't let anyone, including you, forget that." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me breathless and confused and desperately wanting more. A massive thunderstorm trapped us in the office overnight. The power flickered then died completely. Emergency lights cast everything in shadows. I found Jaden in his office, staring out at the storm, a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses on his desk. "Might as well drink," he said, pouring without asking if I wanted any. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the storm raging outside. Old jazz played softly from his phone. The alcohol loosened something between us. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. "Why did you pretend to be my driver?" He stared into his glass for a long time. Then quietly, "Because I wanted to see who I was before you knew what I had. Before the money and the power changed how you looked at me." "That's manipulative," I said, but my voice lacked heat. "I know." He met my eyes. But it was also the most honest week of my life. The silence between us was deafening. The space between us on the couch felt electric, charged with everything unspoken. He leaned closer slowly, his eyes searching mine for permission. My breath caught. His hand reached up to cup my face gently, his thumb brushing my cheek. Then just as his lips almost touched mine, I pulled back. "I don't want to be another secret," I whispered, my voice breaking. Pain flashed across his face, raw and unguarded. "Layla, no." I stood up quickly, grabbing my jacket. "I can't do this. Not like this." I left without looking back, my heart screaming at me to stay, my head insisting I did the right thing. Outside in the parking garage, I saw movement. A car with its lights off. Noah sitting behind the wheel, watching everything with a satisfied smirk. My blood ran cold. How long had he been following me? What had he seen? I drove home in a panic, checking my mirrors constantly. Noah was planning something terrible. I could feel it. The news broke at 8 in the morning. My personal file. My childhood poverty, my therapy sessions after my parents' divorce, fabricated rumors about sleeping my way to promotions, leaked to every major business outlet. My phone exploded with calls and messages. Reporters camped outside my building. I sat on my bathroom floor hyperventilating while the world tore me apart online. Then someone knocked urgently on my door. I opened it to find Jayden standing there, his expression furious and protective. Pack a bag. Now. What? I'm getting you out of here. My legal team is handling the press. But you're not staying here alone. Within an hour I was in his car, driving to a private apartment across town. Who did this? I asked, though I already knew. Noah, Jayden said grimly. But he won't get away with it. I promise you that. That night in the safety of his guest room I finally broke down. And this time Jayden held me while I cried. We drove through the city at midnight, taking old routes I recognized from our week together. Neither of us spoke for a long time, just existed in the comfortable silence I'd missed desperately. Finally Jayden broke it. I left the CEO position once before, he admitted. 5 years ago. Built a company from nothing, took it public, then watched it consume my entire life. I burned out completely, lost myself in the success. I turned to look at him, surprised. So you became a driver? I needed something simple. Something real. Driving gave me peace, let me meet people without the weight of expectations. He glanced at me. And then I met you. My heart stuttered. I wasn't supposed to take you on as a client. But when I read your file, saw your address, something told me I had to. He reached across the console, his hand hovering near mine. I'm sorry for everything. For lying, for the coldness, for being a coward. I laced my fingers through his, finally letting myself touch him. I forgive you, I whispered. The board meeting the next day started normally, until Noah burst through the doors with a stack of papers and a triumphant expression. I have proof, he announced loudly, that Layla manipulated her way into power by sleeping with Arcio before he even took the position. The room erupted. My face burned with humiliation as board members stared at me in shock and disgust. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came. Then Jayden stood up slowly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. That's an interesting theory. Completely false, but interesting. He turned to face Noah directly. Layla earned everything through talent, strategy, and relentless hard work. She's the reason half our clients stayed during the transition. She's the backbone of this company. He paused, then added quietly, and yes, she has my heart. But she earned that too, by being exactly who she is. The room fell silent. Noah's face twisted with rage. Jayden gestured to security. Escort him out. He's done here. That evening I knocked on Jayden's office door. He looked up, his expression guarded, probably expecting me to thank him or confess my feelings. Instead, I placed my resignation letter on his desk. I'm stepping away, I said calmly. Temporarily. Maybe permanently. I need to figure out who I am without this place defining me. Without you defining me. His face fell. Layla, you don't have to, I do. I smiled sadly. You said you walked away once to find yourself. I need to do the same. How long? He asked, his voice rough. I don't know. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. But thank you. For everything. Layla, wait. He stood up, desperate. I'll wait for you. Even if it takes forever. I looked back at him one last time, memorizing his face. Don't wait forever, Jayden. You deserve to be happy too. Then I walked out, my heart breaking but my spirit finally free. The company erupted with rumors, but I didn't care anymore. I was done living for other people's approval. Without Layla, Jayden fell apart. His assistant reported that he worked 18-hour days, barely ate, never smiled. Board meetings became tense and short. Deals started falling through because his focus was elsewhere. At night, he drove the same routes they'd taken together, hoping somehow to feel her presence again. He visited the beach where she'd broken down, sitting alone in the sand as the sun set. Come back to me, he whispered to the wind, knowing she couldn't hear him. His apartment felt empty despite its size. He'd moved her resignation letter to his bedside table, reading it every night before trying to sleep. She'd written at the bottom in small letters he'd almost missed, I loved the man who brought me coffee and let me cry in silence. I hope he finds peace. 2 months passed. Then 3. The company survived, but Jayden merely existed. His father called, concerned. His friends tried to set him up on dates. He refused everything, stuck in the ache of missing someone he'd pushed away through his own fear and pride. In a small coastal town 3 hours away, I sat at a cafe writing a letter I'd never send. Dear Jaden, it began. I hate that I love you. I hate that you made me feel seen when I'd spent years being invisible. I hate that your silence felt safer than anyone else's words. I hate that I think about you every single day, wondering if you're okay, if you're eating, if you remember the beach. But most of all, I hate that I can't stop hoping you'll find me. That you'll show up and fight for this, for us, even though I'm the one who walked away. I'm learning to be whole on my own. But I'm realizing that being whole doesn't mean being alone. It just means choosing people who add to your life instead of taking from it. And you added everything. I still love you. I probably always will. But I needed to love myself first. I finished the letter, folded it carefully, then burned it in the fireplace. But my landlord's daughter saw the ashes, carefully collected them in an envelope, and mailed them to Jaden's office without telling me. The invitation arrived in my mailbox 4 months after I'd left. Cream-colored paper, elegant script. You are cordially invited to the final company gala. Jaden Cross will be stepping down as CEO. My hands trembled holding it. He was leaving. After everything, he was walking away too. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay hidden in my peaceful coastal life. But my heart wouldn't let me. The night of the gala, I stood outside my closet for an hour, staring at the red dress I'd worn before. Finally, I put it on. Still fit perfectly, still made me feel powerful. I drove back to the city, my stomach in knots the entire way. The ballroom was packed with people I used to know, faces I'd once seen every day. They whispered when I walked in, but I held my head high. Then I saw him across the room and the world stopped spinning. He looked thinner, tired, but still devastatingly handsome in his suit. Our eyes met and time fractured into before and after. Jaden stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding the room into silence. He thanked the board, the employees, the investors, all the usual corporate pleasantries. Then his voice changed, became softer, more vulnerable. This company doesn't need another CEO, he said, looking directly at me. But I do need something. Someone actually. The room buzzed with confused whispers. For months ago I met someone who changed everything. She saw through my walls, past my money and power, straight to who I actually am. She taught me that being vulnerable isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing we can do. My eyes filled with tears as everyone turned to look at me. I never wanted power. I wanted peace. Real connection. Honest love. He paused. And I only found that when I was pretending to be her driver, when I was just Jay and she was just Layla and nothing else mattered. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to move. He didn't ask me to come to him. Just stood there waiting, hoping. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cold night air, my breath coming in clouds. Behind me I heard footsteps, his footsteps. Jaden emerged from the building, looking uncertain in a way I'd never seen before. We stood there facing each other across the space. I read your letter, he said quietly. The ashes. I gasped. How? Someone sent them to me. I pieced together what I could read. He stepped closer. You said you needed to love yourself first. Did you? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I did. I am. Then can you love me too? Not the CEO, not the company owner, just me. The guy who drove you around and learned that silence with the right person is better than conversation with anyone else. I reached for his hand and he grabbed it like a lifeline. I don't want the CEO, I whispered. I want the man who brought me coffee and let me cry in silence. He pulled me close and finally, we kissed the way we were supposed to that night in his office. 1 year later I stood in Jaden's car, our car now, watching the sunset over the ocean. We'd left the corporate world behind together, started a wellness company focused on mental health and emotional intelligence in the workplace. It was smaller, quieter, more meaningful. We worked side by side, equals in every way. We still drove together constantly, taking long routes for no reason except that we could. Today we'd driven to the same beach where I'd broken down in front of him. But this time I was whole. He turned off the engine and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small folded note. Not a ring, a note. I unfolded it carefully, my hands shaking. You hired a driver. I found my direction. Will you keep riding beside me? I looked up at him through tears and he was smiling, that soft smile I'd fallen in love with. Yes, I whispered. Always yes. He kissed me as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting everything gold. We'd both been broken, lost, scared. But we'd found each other in the silence, in the honesty, in the simple act of being present. And that was enough. That was everything.